Welcome to this keynote session. My name is Rajkumar, Director of the Mobility21 UTC. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce Yassmin Gramian, the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. She manages Penndot's annual budget of $9.5 billion. She oversees programs and policies affecting highways, urban and rural public transportation, airports, railroads, ports, and waterways. Under her leadership, the department is responsible for Pennsylvania's vast system of state and local highways, bridges, and she also oversees the state's vehicle registration, driver's licenses, and ID operations. She assumed the role of secretary amid the COVID-19 global pandemic, and that necessitated quick and decisive action to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 to best protect citizens, employees, and business partners. She also transferred essential functions to remote operations while continuing to ensure roads were kept safe and passable and crews remained available for responding to weather events. She also served as chair of the Transportation Revenue Options Commission TROC, established by Governor Tom Wolf to develop comprehensive funding recommendations for Pennsylvania's large and aging infrastructure. Prior to joining Penndot, Secretary Gramian worked for over 30 years in operations, design, and management of transportation infrastructure systems, including highway, tolling, bridge, and railroad projects. She earned her master's and bachelor's degrees in civil engineering from the University of Michigan and also completed the truck management training program at Dartmouth. She is a professional engineer in Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and Florida. She is also a member of our advisory council for Traffic21 and Mobility21. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Gramian.
Thank you very much, Raj. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this event. A year ago at this event, I talked about all things COVID, transportation impacts from COVID, importance of coordination with the trucking industry, planning partners, academia. And I'm proud to say we as transportation industry have an impressive record of accomplishments and performance in all those areas. I'm so pleased that your panel will have extensive discussions and exchange of information on equity, climate change, and mobility for all. The pandemic has put a spotlight on our social and economic vulnerabilities. That is education, jobs, public health, access to food, and caring for loved ones. And these vulnerabilities will likely influence the role of transportation in local, regional, and national level. We need to pay special attention to exploring solutions that will reduce inequities in our system and build resilience against future disruptions. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about how Penndot fits into this and what it really means to be a Department of Transportation. Transportation infrastructure is the underlying system designed to facilitate movement of people and goods. And as world populations have grown over time, so has the need for better and more advanced system of transportation. And for so many years, people have looked at the DOT as the highway and bridge organization. And supporting our state's large highway and bridge program and network is extremely important, and it's part of what we do. But we are so much more. And the so much more part of this mission will be so critical as we move into the new age of mobility. We must ask ourselves, who is well served by our current transportation system and who has limited mobility and access? Are we spending taxpayer dollars equitably across all communities and all transportation modes? Or can we help assist marginalized communities that may have fewer resources to advocate for themselves? Are we listening to and engaging meaningfully with communities that are impacted both positively and negatively by our projects? So we are no longer just a highway department. We're multimodal, we're intermodal, What we do is about keeping people connected to each other and providing them with mobility and access to all their social and economic needs. We need to make sure that we are creating a future of mobility that is safe, reliable, no matter who you are and where you live. Transportation needs to work for everyone. Whether you drive a car, you walk, bike, or use public transportation, it's our job to not only be experts of our transportation system itself, but also in the challenges and inequities that our system perpetuates as we integrate new solutions and plan for future investments. We're exploring solutions that will reduce inequities in our system, build resilience against future disruptions, improve safety, and support both environmental and financial sustainability. In support of this, last year, Penndot created the Dismantling Systemic Racism and Inequities, or DSRI working group, which includes staff from across Penndot. The DSRI working group was charged with assessing Penndot's diversity and inclusion efforts, better understanding structural racism in transportation, evaluating programs and initiatives that could help with these issues. In July, we released a report on how Penndot can achieve greater equity in workplace with right information, incentives, and investment in leadership programs. We need to ensure that our workforce reflects the populations we serve. We hear that all the time. I know there are many folks here today who share my commitment to encouraging more women and minorities to join transportation and engineering fields. When I began my career as a civil engineer in the 80s, women made up only 7% of the STEM workforce, 7%. Back then, there were very few women in the industry or role models to look up to, particularly one who looked like me. It was an uphill climb. As I've built my career in the transportation industry, I'm pleased to see how far women have come. I used to be the one of the few, or the only one, only woman in the meetings or at the table. I'm proud to see, and I'm proud to be the second woman Penndot secretary and to be surrounded by a diverse group of women on my senior leadership team. However, we still have more work to do, and I'm committed to lifting up more women and more minorities. Today, women make up 27% of the STEM workforce and just 13% of engineers, 13%. Black workers of all genders make up just 9% of STEM workers, and Latino workers make up only 7%. We must create an environment within transportation industry that makes it clear that everyone is welcome, all are welcome, and we need the diverse expertise and perspectives to solve our most pressing transportation challenges. Emphasis on STEM for women and minorities is fundamental, and that emphasis starts early. The skills of women and members of all marginalized communities are needed in transportation. Leaders at every level must use their power, their platform, and resources to help organizations overcome racism and build a better world for all of us. One only needs to look at our history to see that transportation and race have long been intertwined in the United States. More than 50 years ago, Martin Luther King Jr. called urban planning, urban public transportation, a genuine civil rights issue. The nation's infrastructure investments have promoted systemic racism, impacting generations of people of color. And while there has been tremendous progress within the past century, in many cases, communities feel cut out of the decision-making process, resulting in a transportation plan and transportation system that doesn't serve everyone equitably. At Penndot, we have several projects that have not only helped improve our infrastructure, but accessibility, mobility, and community connections as well. Also, these projects help to right the wrongs of the past. When federally funded highways were constructed in the 60s through Black and brown neighborhoods, effectively isolating those communities. For example, the I-95 CAP project in Philadelphia removes the barrier created by the construction of I-95 in the 1960s before the passage of National Environmental Policy Act. The CAP is a multimodal project with 12 acres of public green space and links the historic Old City neighborhood to the waterfront, Delaware waterfront area. The I-579 CAP in Pittsburgh is very similar. It's a great example. The project will construct a CAP structure spanning I-579, create a link between downtown Pittsburgh and the Hill District. The I-579 CAP is also a great example of a multi-organizational collaboration. The project is sponsored by the Pittsburgh Sports and Exhibition Authority. Penndot is overseeing the construction, and the city of Pittsburgh will own and maintain the park and recreation area upon completion. The project will create a new 3 acres of green space, which will include pedestrian pathways, bicycle routes, rain gardens for stormwater management, and some design elements from the neighborhood's artists. And we have more similar projects in Philadelphia on different sections of I-95 while we are reconstructing the much needed roadway and viaduct. We're also improving access to transit system. We're also enhancing lighting in that area. We include bike lanes, sidewalk, and open space. So all these projects are incredibly collaborative. For example, on the I-95 CAP project, CAP project, we had a presence of community events and neighborhood gatherings, and we shared 2D and 3D electronic graphics, light and shadow simulations for adjacent properties, and virtual reality audio simulations of highway noise and residents. It's important that communities are included in decision-making process. And through our Penndot Connects, it's a planning initiative that we work with the communities and stakeholders to ensure that our projects meet the needs of the local communities. Of course, technology and innovation in our field presents us with an opportunity to reinvent transportation in a way that is smarter, cleaner, safer, more equitable, and more efficient than ever before. Automation offers a unique opportunity to supplement, enhance, or fill the gap of existing services. For example, the low-speed automated shuttles could be used to help address peak demands on off-hour operations. This possibility will be explored in Philadelphia with an automated shuttle pilot at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. As part of the Smart Columbus program, Ohio is using a low-speed shuttle to provide a new mobility solution to a disadvantaged community with no existing service. Maximizing benefits of new technology will involve intentionally bringing benefits to those who are most disadvantaged by the current transportation system. As I'm sure you've heard, law was passed last year to allow personal delivery devices, or PDDs, to operate in Pennsylvania. And in June, KiwiBot became the first authorized PDD in Pennsylvania and began food deliveries in Pittsburgh this summer. Given the current global health crisis, PDDs offer an opportunity to supplement an already strained by supply chain and allow for an additional form of contactless delivery. We're working closely with companies on policies to help ensure the safe operations of these devices. So let's talk about vehicle automation. When it comes to vehicle automation, Penndot has an active seat at the table and has been nationally recognized for our leadership as a DOT in this space. Testing has been occurring on public roadways in Pennsylvania since 2011. And AV developers like Argo AI, Aurora Locomotion, and more are headquartered in Pennsylvania, and new companies such as Waymo are moving in. Penndot is actively working with various stakeholders to prepare Pennsylvania roadways for large-scale deployment of AVs in the future. This is being achieved through strategic plan development, initiation of testing guidance, and ongoing research and pilot deployments. In addition, Penndot is working with Ohio and Michigan through the Smart Belt Coalition, examining ways to align processes to support truck platooning and automated freight operations across jurisdictional boundaries. Knowing that states have different ways to authorize operations and share data with industry, the Smart Belt Coalition is working to identify the common elements of state regulations and agency policies. While these advances are exciting on their own, as the automated vehicle sector continues to grow, so does the potential for job creation and economic growth. In fact, as I'm sure you're all aware, the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber and the Regional Industrial Development Corporation issued a study earlier this month that indicates that Pittsburgh region is one of the top centers for autonomous mobile systems in the world. I imagine that each of you shares my excitement and my optimism that technology will deliver a much better transportation system that's safer, cleaner, more efficient, affordable, and inclusive. And there is a real urgency here as the impacts of climate change are affecting us every day. In September, the remnants of Hurricane Ida dumped rain on Pennsylvania for nearly 24 hours, as well as high winds and even tornadoes. Ida resulted in major flooding in many areas, south central and southeastern part of the state. Heavy rains and extreme weather wreak havoc on our transportation infrastructure. Over 400 roads were closed at the height of Ida's impact, including 6 major interstates or expressways. One particular dramatic example that I'm sure you're all aware of is the Vine Street Expressway in Philadelphia, which was flooded with nearly 30 million gallons of water, filling entire roadway and rising up to the underdecks of the cross bridges as if river was flowing through the city. The Vine Street Expressway became the Vine Street Canal. It remained closed for several days as multiple agencies worked to remove the water, clean up the debris, and checked for damages. And over 800 bridges around the state needed post-flood inspection for Ida. So all these are going to cost the state a lot of money. We anticipate over $16 million in damages from Hurricane Ida and over 1,200 damaged locations. In 2018, which was the wettest year on record for parts of Pennsylvania, there was nearly $126 million in flood and slide-related damage to state-maintained roads and bridges, not to mention the financial impacts to the local networks. This is roughly equal to the cost of resurfacing 125 miles of 2-lane interstates, and the highest cost in any single year in the last 10 years. Emergencies like this impact budgets, planned projects, and workforce priorities. These are the real-world impacts of a changing climate. Flooding is happening more often and in areas where it may never have happened in the past. Pennsylvania has seen a 10% increase in precipitation over the past 50 years, and by 2050, precipitation will increase by another 8% over what we have today. In 2018, Penndot finalized an extreme weather vulnerability study, which analyzed past Penndot flooding-related data, traffic volumes, federal and national weather and flooding resources, and identified roadways susceptible to flooding based on that data. We incorporated the data into the study and into our maintenance and planning practices, and we designed projects with long-term resiliency in mind. Because we know that we're already experiencing the effect of climate change, we need to proactively work to adapt to this new reality. And as we talk about climate change, we should mention that transportation is the highest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States and the second highest in Pennsylvania. We are happy to see more and more people are choosing hybrid and electric vehicles over traditional gas-powered ones. We need to provide the infrastructure for this changing trend. Penndot has already begun its preparation for the EV future. In May of this year, we embarked on the statewide EV mobility plan, which builds on the information and strategies presented in the DEP's vehicle roadmap. The plan will evaluate the current state of transportation and electrification in Pennsylvania and identify mobility challenges experienced by EV owners. Pennsylvania was also selected by the Federal Highway Administration to participate in 2 alternative fuel deployment plan projects to establish EV charging infrastructure along I-80 as well as I-78 and I-81 corridors. We've also established an internal working group at Penndot to focus on how we can best prepare the public for electrification at the department and share information with the public. So let's talk about equity and reliance on public transportation. Public transportation is available in some form in all 67 Pennsylvania counties and in many areas of the state. It's difficult, and in many areas of the state, it's difficult to get around with access or without access to a vehicle. Pennsylvanians who are part of a minority group are disproportionately impacted by this. 34% of Black, 22% of Latinos, 23% of Native Americans, 14% of Asian Pacific Islander households in Pennsylvania do not have access to a vehicle as compared to 8% of white Pennsylvania households. We must continue to advocate for sustainable funding for public transit so that no matter who you are and how you travel, you can get to where you need to go. This year, we're launching a partnering program with several organizations on a 24-month workforce development transit pilot program. The program is designed to provide public transportation services that connect job seekers with employment opportunities that were previously unreachable due to a lack of transportation options. The pilot program is being launched in 2 corridors in Pennsylvania, Gettysburg to Hanover and Coatesville to Gap. And finally, last week, I was in San Diego attending AASHTO annual meeting with colleagues from all the states and District of Columbia. Our incoming president of AASHTO is Dr. Sean Wilson from Louisiana DOT. He's the first Black president of AASHTO in the 107 years of this organization. When he joined the AASHTO board of directors, Dr. Wilson recalls being the only African-American seated at the table. Today, he's among the 6 African-American board members, a board that now also includes 13 female members. Dr. Wilson said that while those numbers are improving, we need to do more. Entitled Pathways to Equity, Dr. Wilson said, this emphasis area is designed to intentionally expand opportunities within the state DOT community by creating a culture that identifies, trains, and empowers individuals in underrepresented populations, covering age, gender, ethnicity, and race, much like what we are hoping to accomplish under our DSRI program at Penndot. Dr. Wilson also talked about how we sustain that opportunity to achieve equity. How are we as state DOTs building a bench of leaders that reflects the population in the communities we serve? How do we diversify? Not just with race, but with gender, with disciplines. How do we change what we do as a Department of Transportation in a way that opens up the opportunities to recruit and retain a more capable, qualified, and inclusive professional workforce? Dr. Wilson's second emphasis area is partnering to deliver, and that is an AASHTO and State DOT initiative designed to create partnership with non-traditional organizations, transportation related and non-transportation specific. Quote, the idea is to embrace the richness of differing perspective represented in the broader transportation community, enhance awareness, and strengthen understanding, unquote. Folks, as we are envisioning and realizing the next era of America's transportation infrastructure, I'd like to share some information on the trends and for all of you to consider as you're developing your strategic and business plans. Prior to the pandemic, 68% of employees reported working in the office 5 days a week. During the pandemic, less than 24% did. Up to 85% of jobs by 2030 could be in industries or occupations that do not exist today. The share of people who set sidewalks and places to walk are very important factors in deciding where to live, climbed over 50% in each generation except 75 plus. The share of baby boomers who considered access to highways very important dropped by 8% from 2019 to 2020. The share of residents who considered access to public transit is very important declined from 2019 to 2020 among Gen Z and millennials. Nearly 80% of farming-dependent rural counties lost population from 2010 to 2020. The American Society of Civil Engineers grades the US wastewater infrastructure a D+, schools a D+, public parks a D+, water infrastructure a C-, energy a C. And by 2050, 32% of counties will be at high or extreme risk of water shortages compared to 10% today. The US is likely to exceed 400 million residents by 2060, with international migration driving growth at a level ahead of most major industrial nations. Nearly 70 million Americans are projected to be foreign-born by 2060. By 2028, the percentage of US population that is foreign-born will be higher than any time since 1850. The number of non-Hispanic white residents will shrink beyond 2030, offset by strong growth in multiracial Asian and Hispanic populations. By 2034, adults over the age of 65 will outnumber children under 18 for the first time in United States history. About 2 out of 3 seniors will outlive their ability to drive by an average of 7 to 10 years. Today, 12.7% of Americans have one or more disabilities. 8.2% limited English proficiency. 2 out of 5 considered to be obese, and 3 out of 5 with one or more chronic health conditions. What could the future look like for transportation? How do we meet the unique needs of aging Americans as well as persons with disabilities and chronic health conditions? How will the emerging Gen Z residents prefer to live, to work, to travel? How can we provide better access to jobs, healthcare, education, and other services particularly for people living in historically disadvantaged areas. With an aging workforce, declining labor force, and increasing skill requirements, will we have sufficient numbers of skilled workers? Will automation displace large number of today's workers or free people up for productive activities in newer occupations? How will a long-term shift towards flexible schedules and remote work impact traditional employment centers, housing choices, and commuting flows? I don't need to tell you that the world of transportation is changing. This is an exciting time to be in transportation field. I truly believe that transportation is at the cusp of a renaissance. Ladies and gentlemen, let's work together to redefine the ambitions and goals of transportation such that we could respond to the evolutionary trends and shape the culture and mission to enhance prosperity and well-being for everyone. The work that all of you are doing to take research and study out of the theoretical realm and make it into a reality for the benefit of our communities is so important, and I thank you for that. The work you do is creating our transportation future. I'm honored to have been invited to speak to you today, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Gramian, for your very insightful presentation.
Thank you.
We really appreciate getting to know the activities that are leading at Penndot to meet the needs of today and addressing the challenges of tomorrow. A couple of questions, if I may. First, I guess, hopefully we'll be coming out of the pandemic in the coming months. As you indicated, traffic will probably go down. That basically means fewer vehicle miles travel, therefore fewer lower taxes being paid. And then with the transition to EVs, they're not paying any gasoline taxes. Can you talk to how Penndot is responding to these changes?
That's a great question, Raj. I appreciate it. So as you mentioned, the trend is changing. People are driving less. However, we are seeing more trucks on the roadways, as you can see, and different kinds of trucks, right? We see bigger trucks, we see box trucks. We used to get one delivery a day, and that was the mailman. And today, you know, when you work from home, you see like multiple cars, trucks driving to your neighborhood delivering packages. So we definitely see a change in people's choice of access to food and choice of access to products. Obviously, with the emerging technology on the EV side, we're very concerned about how it's going to impact the funding for Department of Transportation. As I've been saying for years, and my predecessors also have been talking about or emphasizing the importance of transportation and funding for it, we're losing revenue on the transportation side for our highway and bridge program. And the reason for that is exactly what you just mentioned. There is a change in our choices and our behavior for commuting, as well as the cars are becoming more efficient, the CAFE standard. We actually anticipate somewhere between $15 to $20 million of lost revenue from motor license fund. 78% of our funding for bridge and highway program comes from motor license fund. We have not seen any significant increase from at the federal level since 1993. That's 28 years ago, 1993. Not to mention the prices are going up, and there is a reduction, as I mentioned, in the revenue from the gas tax. You look at the neighboring state, they have other sources of revenue to pay for the highway and bridge program. I don't see any state being as close as we are in terms of 78% reliance of gas tax. This year, the governor, under the governor's executive order, we established the Transportation Revenue Option Commission, as you just mentioned. There were over 40 members on the commission and one person from the Penndot, and that was me. I was the chair of the commission. We had folks from the public and private side, all modes of transportation, folks from the disability and all other advocacy groups. And we had 9 meetings altogether, and we were tasked to develop alternative solutions to fund the transportation. And the solutions must be comprehensive and reduce our reliance on the gas tax, as we can see, because it is becoming an unreliable source. So how are we addressing this thing? The issue of funding, it cannot be addressed by one solution. First of all, at the federal level, we are hoping that the infrastructure transportation package will get past the Congress, and we will have a bill in place that would infuse more funding into all the states, including Pennsylvania. Keep in mind that the new numbers that they're presenting in the infrastructure bill, it's not, there is some additional $4 billion to the current funding that we're receiving at the federal level. This additional $4 billion is over 5 years, and it incrementally goes up. So the first year we're getting an additional $270 million in highway funding, an additional $260 million in bridge funding. And the number, as I said, goes up. So that is one aspect through the additional funding we're getting from the feds. In addition to that, we're looking into a tolling project within the state of Pennsylvania. Last October, we presented a package of a program called the Major Bridge P3 program, through which we are considering 9 bridges to be reconstructed through availability payment by tolling. And the method of contracting is going to be through public-private partnership. We definitely need to bring the private industry, as I mentioned, into our transportation system to support us with the improvements that we want to make to our transportation system, as well as financing our transportation system. So that's another, it's a solution at the state level. And also there are other options that we're considering that came out of the Transportation Revenue Option Commission. And some of those options could be a package delivery fee. Some of those options could be a revision to the registration fee for EV vehicles, and additional taxing, additional fees. There are multiple options, short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions to our transportation funding.
Thanks very much for that the deep and detailed response, Secretary Gramian. One other question: under your leadership and guidance, Pennsylvania has continued to be a leader in the autonomous vehicle space. As you know, it's supposed to grow into a major industry of global proportions. Because of that, various states in the country are competing for leadership. As you know, states like California and Arizona even allow completely driverless operations. What is your thinking about how we can enable Pennsylvania to maintain and maybe extend the leadership, but at the same time keep the public safe?
Yeah, that's a great question, Raj. Thank you. And we're very mindful of the concerns that you mentioned, the safety, also enabling the industry to be able to grow in Pennsylvania. We're thrilled that they have chosen to come to Pittsburgh area, working with CMU and as well as Pitt, and also the industry, the private, the chambers, to develop and deploy the autonomous vehicle program. As you know, there are multiple things that we need to address until we are fully able to do the deployment on our roadways, the driverless autonomous vehicles. First of all, we need to make sure that we have proper policies in place. We also need to make sure that there's enabling legislation in place. We're very happy that Senator Langeholk is fully embracing and endorsing this industry, and we will be working with Senator Langeholk to make sure that we are addressing the legislation that's needed for this industry to expand their deployment. So there are a lot of things that are being considered at the state level by the legislators, by the administration, and by the Department of Transportation. We definitely don't want to lose our edge and the position we have as a state, and we're very excited and happy to see that actually more companies are moving into Pennsylvania. And again, Pittsburgh has become the cradle for the autonomous vehicle. And I think this industry is just going to grow and boom in the emerging technologies that we are seeing today in Pittsburgh.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Secretary Gramian. Thank you for your leadership and for your active participation and presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.